According to official records, June 23, 1965 begins like any other summer day in Houston, Texas. The small house at 1815 Driscoll Street sits quietly beneath the heat. The curtains are closed. The neighborhood is calm. Nothing about the property suggests that it is about to become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in American history. Inside that house, a secret has been waiting in silence. And when investigators finally discover it, the case will shock the nation, launch decades of speculation, and leave behind a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The welfare check begins after concerned relatives fail to reach Edwina Rogers. The silence becomes impossible to ignore. Police officers arrive at the residence expecting a routine visit. They knock on the front door. No answer. They knock again. Still nothing. The house feels abandoned. The windows are dark. The curtains remain sealed shut. Eventually, investigators decide to enter. The moment they step inside, something feels wrong. The air is stale. The rooms are unnaturally quiet. Nothing appears disturbed. There are no signs of forced entry. No evidence of a struggle. No overturned furniture. Then investigators enter the kitchen. An old refrigerator stands against the wall. When they open it, they discover something that will forever define this case. Inside are the remains of Fred and Edwina Rogers. The discovery is horrifying. The scene immediately becomes one of the most notorious murder investigations in Texas history. Detectives quickly secure the property. Crime scene specialists begin documenting every inch of the house. Yet even in those first moments, another question emerges. Where is Charles Rogers? The son of the victims is nowhere to be found. And from that moment forward, he is never seen again. Fred Rogers and Edwina Rogers were not wealthy celebrities. They were ordinary residents of Houston. Neighbors described them as quiet. Their home sat in a modest neighborhood. Their lives appeared unremarkable from the outside. But as investigators dig deeper, they begin uncovering a family dynamic that few people fully understood. The Rogers household was unusually isolated. Family members lived under the same roof, yet often appeared emotionally distant. Privacy was valued. Personal matters stayed inside the home. To outsiders, there was little indication that anything catastrophic was approaching. But that was before investigators entered Charles Rogers' room. Charles Frederick Rogers was an intelligent and deeply private man. He possessed technical skills and interests that set him apart from many of his peers. He spent long periods alone. He rarely attracted attention. Neighbors knew little about him. Friends were scarce. His daily activities remained largely hidden behind the walls of the family residence. As detectives examine his room, they find personal belongings, papers, and equipment. The space suggests someone who lived a highly structured and private life. Yet one thing is immediately clear. Charles Rogers is gone. No note, no explanation, no trace of where he went. And that absence soon becomes the center of the investigation. Investigators begin reconstructing the final known days inside the house. They analyze the crime scene. They review timelines. They interview relatives, neighbors, and anyone who might provide insight into the family. The deeper they look, the stranger the situation becomes. The house appears unusually clean. Investigators note evidence suggesting that significant effort was made to remove signs of what had happened. Rooms appear organized. Surfaces have been cleaned. The scene feels controlled. It should have ended there. It didn't. As forensic examination continues, detectives focus increasingly on Charles Rogers. Physical evidence recovered inside the residence points investigators toward him. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance only strengthen those suspicions. If Charles is innocent, why vanish? If Charles is a victim too, where is he? And if Charles is responsible, how does a man simply disappear? Those questions become the foundation of the case. Across Houston, the search expands. Police distribute information. Investigators follow leads. Potential sightings are reported. Tips arrive from different locations. Each lead creates hope. Each lead eventually collapses. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months become years. Charles Rogers remains missing. The detective would later say it was one of the strangest cases imaginable. Because unlike many investigations, the primary suspect is never available to question. There is no arrest, no confession, no courtroom testimony, no trial, only silence. As years pass, theories begin multiplying. Some focus entirely on the evidence found inside the house. Others attempt to explain how Charles Rogers could disappear so completely. Rumors spread. Speculation grows. Stories emerge that place him in distant locations. Some claim he escaped the country. Others insist he adopted a new identity. But documented evidence remains limited. What the report didn't mention, and this is the part that matters, is how uncertainty creates space for myth. The less people know, the more stories they create. And few cases generated more stories than the Icebox murders. Books are written. Articles are published. Researchers revisit the evidence. Independent investigators examine the timeline again and again. Yet despite decades of attention, no definitive answer emerges. The known facts remain surprisingly simple. Fred and Edwina Rogers were found dead inside their Houston home. Charles Rogers disappeared. He was never located. The case remained unresolved. Everything else exists within layers of uncertainty. And uncertainty is where mysteries survive. As the investigation continues through the years, detectives face an uncomfortable reality. Without Charles Rogers, many questions may never be answered. Motive remains difficult to establish with certainty. Intentions remain unclear. The exact sequence of events inside the home can only be partially reconstructed. The official narrative contains evidence, but evidence is not the same as complete understanding. There are still gaps, still missing pieces. Still moments where the timeline becomes unclear. Here is where the official timeline breaks down. Investigators can identify what was discovered. They can analyze physical evidence. They can establish likely conclusions. But they cannot explain what happened after Charles Rogers left the house. That chapter simply vanishes. Somewhere beyond Houston, the trail ends. No verified sighting ever resolves the mystery. No confirmed record closes the investigation. No final discovery explains the disappearance. The suspect becomes a ghost. And ghosts are difficult to catch. As decades pass, Houston changes. Neighborhoods evolve. Buildings disappear. New generations move into old streets. The city continues forward. Yet the house at 1815, Driscoll Street, remains forever connected to one extraordinary crime. For many people, the murders are disturbing enough. For investigators, the disappearance is what truly lingers. Because murder cases usually end somewhere. An arrest, a conviction, a confession, a body, a final answer. The Icebox murders provide none of those conclusions. Instead, they leave behind a void, a missing man, a silent house, and questions that continue surviving long after the evidence has been boxed away. The case file grows older. Documents fade. Investigators retire. Witnesses pass away. But the mystery remains remarkably intact. Every few years, interest returns. A documentary, a podcast, a newspaper feature. A new generation discovers the story and asks the same question. What happened to Charles Rogers? No one knows. And perhaps that is why the case continues attracting attention. Humans are uncomfortable with unfinished stories. We want endings. We want certainty. We want explanations. The icebox murders refuse to provide them. The crime scene delivered answers about what happened inside the house. But the disappearance created a second mystery, a mystery layered on top of the first. And that second mystery remains unsolved. Today, the official position has never truly changed. Charles Rogers remains the primary suspect. The murders remain among the most infamous in Texas history, and the disappearance remains unexplained. The years have not softened the questions. If anything, they have made them stronger, because every year that passes makes it less likely that new evidence will emerge. Less likely that witnesses will appear. Less likely that the missing pieces will ever be recovered. And so the case exists in a strange state. Part solved, part unsolved, part history. Part mystery. A house, a refrigerator, a vanished suspect. A trail that disappears into darkness. And after all these years, one question still remains. When Charles Rogers walked away from that house in Houston, where did he go? No one has ever been able to answer that. And until someone does, the icebox murders remain one of America's most unsettling, unsolved mysteries. What happened to Charles Rogers? Officially, he remains the primary suspect. The physical evidence recovered inside the house pointed investigators toward him. His disappearance only deepened those suspicions. To many observers, the conclusion seems obvious. A crime occurred. The suspect fled. The mystery ends there. But mysteries rarely survive for generations when the answers are truly that simple. Because if Charles Rogers did leave Houston after the murders, how did he do it? How did a man at the center of a nationally reported homicide investigation vanish without leaving behind a verified trail? No confirmed sightings. No verified identity changes. No arrest. No body. No final chapter. The years that followed produced rumors, theories, and speculation. Some claimed he escaped the country. Others believed he lived under an assumed identity. Stories surfaced from distant places, each promising to explain what happened next. Yet one by one, those stories collapsed under scrutiny. None could be proven. None could close the case. And that leaves us with a possibility investigators dislike more than any other. The possibility that some part of the truth was never discovered. Because the crime scene answered certain questions, but not all of them. It explained what investigators found. It did not fully explain why it happened. It did not explain what Charles Rogers intended to do afterward. And it certainly did not explain how a man could disappear so completely in an era long before the internet, long before digital surveillance, and long before modern tracking systems.